Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Krishna, Krishna, Hare, Hare Rama, Jaya Radha, Nanda Bhaktivinoda Sachidananda Jai I hope that will not be flickering. My just switches off, comes back on. So just devotees have to. That happens again. It's out of my control. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Devaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritam Narottam Chaiva Devim Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Tamashloka Bhakti Appearance of the great Acharya. We will first read the verse of Srimad Bhagavatam as per schedule, and we will dedicate the majority of the Katha to life and teaching of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and we'll touch upon Gadadhar Pandit Disappearance Day also. So verse 26 in the 27th chapter, attacked by Chandavega in the city of Puranjana, from the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Atho bhajasvamam bhadra bhajantim me dayam kuru etavan purusho dharmo yatartan anukampate. Atho bhajasvamam bhadra bhajantim me dayam kuru etavan purusho dharmo yatartan anukampate. Atho bhajasvamam bhadra bhajantim me Dayam Kuru Etavan Purusho Dharmo Yatartan Anukampate. Anyone likes to read the verse? Krishna. Okay. Word to word translation. I hope I'm heard. Before this mic is different that I usually use. Word-to-word translation. Ato, therefore. Bhajasva, accept. Mam, me. Bhadra, O gentle one. Bhajantim, willing to serve. Me, to me. Dayam, mercy. Kuru, do. Etavan, such a measure. Paurushaha, for any gentleman. Dharmaha, religious principle. Yat, that. Artan, to the distressed. Anukampate is compassionate. Translation. Kalakanya continued, O gentle one, I am now present before you to serve you. And show mercy. It is a gentleman's greatest duty to be compassionate upon a person who is distressed. Purport. Yavana Raja, the king of the Yavanas, could also refuse to accept Kalakanya, daughter of time, but he considered the request due to the order of Narada Muni. Thus he accepted Kalakanya in a different way. In other words, the injunctions of Narada Muni or the path of devotional service can be accepted by anyone within the three worlds, and certainly by the king of the Yavanas. Lord Chaitanya himself requested everyone to preach the cult of Bhakti Yoga all over the world, in every village and town. Preachers in the Krishna conscious movement have actually experienced that even the Yavanas and Mlechas taken to spiritual life on the strength of Narada Muni's Pancharatrika, as recommended by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Everyone throughout the world will benefit. Wonderful purpose. So the verse again. Atho bhajasvamam bhadra bhajanti medayam kuru etavan paurasho dharmo yatartana nukampate. Kalakanya continued, O gentle one, I am now present before you to serve you. Please accept me and thus show me mercy. It is a gentleman's greatest duty. Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manabhishtam Stapita Yena Bhutale Swayarupa Kadamyam Tadati Swapadam Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvyacha Patitanam Pavantam Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurapani Prachari Right, so by mercy of Srila Prabhupada and the sequence of our verses in Srimad Bhagavatam, we are having a wonderful purport today, which we have to speak today about. It is a gentleman's greatest duty and I hope we're back. So again, it is the gentleman's greatest duty to be compassionate upon a person who is distressed. We can see how Prabhupada often used the phrase that Vaishnava is a perfect gentleman. And here we see in this verse that it's a gentleman's duty to be compassionate to those who are distressed. And in Kali Yuga's definition is constant distress, ongoing and ever-increasing distress as Kali Yuga progresses. And for this reason, it is a very great auspiciousness today to speak about the life of Sachitananda Bhaktivinoda Thakura, one of our predecessors, a great acharya, but in fact, we can say from the contemporary time, the greatest, because he was the one who has revived the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Nityananda to spread this Krishna consciousness all over the world. He was the root and the main seed from which Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and Srila Prabhupada came about right after. So just before I start to speak on his life, I wanted to just point out, if you think about it, we are on a daily basis, if we're practicing Krishna consciousness as the way that Srila Prabhupada has outlined for us to practice Krishna consciousness, then we're actually contacting or are in touch with Bhaktivinoda Thakur on daily basis many times. How is this? Through his bhajans. Just now we have chanted Jai Radha Madhava bhajan, which Srila Prabhupada is introduced to Krishna consciousness practice in 1973, if I'm not mistaken, or 1974, 1973. He started to chant it every time before Srimad Bhagavatam class. It's a wonderful picture of Vrindavan, a perfect picture of Vrindavan. Srila Prabhupada used to say, everything is there. A few times Srila Prabhupada went in a deep samadhi trance just during the public lecture in front of all the disciples, that he couldn't move. His voice choked up, tears were falling in his eyes. And after a few minutes of complete silence, he just would say, just chant Hare Krishna, and then he would walk away. This happened at least twice. After Jai Radha Madhava bhajan, if we do practice Krishna consciousness as Prabhupada gave us, then we chant the Sharira Vidya Jal prayers before taking breakfast, and then before taking lunch, and before taking dinner, if we have dinner. So at least 3 times more we chant another bhajan of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, describing how our senses, if they're just leading us to hell, if it's not controlled by the tongue, is not controlled by Krishna Prasad. So if we're not purifying the senses through honoring prasadam, we may end up ending in the opposite direction to the spiritual world. So there's Sarara Vidijal prayers. Then there's Bhoga Arti prayer. We're lucky here that in our MP3 player that plays here for pleasure of the deities with Prabhupada bhajans. Apart from Prabhupada bhajans, there's this famous Yamuna Devi and Mukunda and Shyamasundar. Their album, the Hare Krishna. So all those bhajans are there, including this Bhakatavatsala Gauri Hari, the Bhoga offering bhajan, which sometimes even coincides and it plays right during the midday arati. Somehow I hear it quite often. So this is another bhajan of Bhaktivinoda Thakur that is quite often sang for the pleasure of the deities, or in when they're accepting the bhoga that we are preparing for them, Vaj Bhoga. Then there's another bhajan, and that's arati. Kiva Jaya Jaya Gora Chande Aratika Shoga. So actually, if we are living life, especially in temple, and we are connected with Bhaktivinoda Thakur day and night. And as far as I know, in Vrindavan, in the home of Vrindavan, this planet Earth, they also chant another bhajan. Just before Mangalarati, they chant another bhajan when the night is finished. You know, this bhajan there. This one. As far as I know, this is the only temple that have this bhajan chanted before Mangalarati, when the deities are waking up. So somebody is connected with Bhaktivinoda Thakur even more on a daily basis. And of course, there are other wonderful bhajans that are sometimes chanted by devotees. One of them, beautiful bhajan, Gurudev, Gurudev, Kripa Vinadina. We're asking for mercy of Gurudev. There's another bhajan which is very deep. Kabe habe bolo se dinama. Aparada guchi shudanamaruchi. This bhajan is about the time when we're praying, when this day will be mine, when I will stop making offenses and the shudanam, the pure name, will finally appear on my tongue. It's very deep bhajan to chant. It's beautiful bhajan to chant. And then there's another favorite bhajan in Gitanagari, and we have even the words for them. We may sing today. Yashamati Nandana, Prajanaganagara. So this is another bhajan that somehow or other, when Chandramali Maharaj comes, he always chants this bhajan for the deities. I notice that devotees quite often pull out this bhajan and chant for deities' pleasure. So actually, I just named, I don't know, about 10 bhajans already that we are actually very much familiar with, and at least 5 of them we actually chanting on a daily basis if we lived in a normal temple life program. So how wonderful is that? We are connected with Bhaktivinoda Thakura so much by the mercy of our Srila Prabhupada, who has basically introduced this Krishna consciousness to us. Okay, so this was the introduction about bhajans, so we can meditate and actually dive into those bhajans more often to be connected with Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Now, I know all of you have heard the life and teaching of Bhaktivinoda Thakur so many times, at least twice a year, for the duration of your lifespan, and many years, some of you many decades, some of you almost 50 years in Krishna consciousness here. So you must have heard Bhaktivinoda Thakur's stories over 100 times by now. But I was trying to pull out some details in his biography, which I have not heard maybe before, or something that I missed when I was hearing about his autobiographies. And so some details maybe you have not heard before. I don't know. We'll see. We'll try. So one interesting detail, well, I'll start right from his birth. One interesting detail is that when he was 2 years old, he was already noticed to be spoken poetry. So somehow or other, this little boy, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, at this time born as Kedaranandhat, a little clumsy and, what do you say, homely, like not ugly, but a little homely and clumsy boy. All his other brothers were beautiful. He was a little clumsy, but for that he was especially affected. There was a special affection from his mother, because his older brother, he had 5 siblings. He was in the middle, a third born. He had a younger sister and 2 younger brothers and 2 older brothers. So his older brother, the oldest brother, he died very soon. I think even before Bhaktivinoda Thakur was born. And all the other siblings of his were beautiful by outlook. His mother was saying, doesn't matter he is little, as long as he lives a long life. So he had, even for that specifically, she had even more affection for him. But then they started to notice interesting characteristics in this boy. So when he was 2 years old, he started to speak poetry. The way he was speaking, he was sometimes just make poetry spontaneously. And I cannot translate Hare Krishna. Okay, I hope we're back. I cannot translate Bengali like in a rhyme, but the first poem of Bhaktivinoda Thakur was something like that. His father was in Calcutta for a very long time trying to sort out the business affairs, and he was coming back. He was expected to come back, and Will Bhaktivinoda was anxious to see his father. And in fact, he has not seen him before, because when he was born, the father left to sort out those different business affairs. In Calcutta, there were some problems, some conspiracies going on with properties and things like that. And when he was coming back, so Bhaktivinoda Thakur, spontaneously, he was standing on the road, there was a crow, a black crow. And he said something like this. He said, "Oh, black crow, color of eggplant, my father is back today. Are you leaving the road or not?" But he said it in a poetic rhythm form. so when parents heard it, mother heard it, she was astonished. How come he's saying so nicely and while he is very, very young? So yes, that's how his Vaishnava quality, being poetic, has started to exhibit even when he was a little child. He got himself very much, he learned English very quickly after he was about 7 years old. First he went to the Bengali school when he was 5. And when he was 7, he had a teacher, he moved to the different school. He had a teacher, he was French by origin, a French teacher, so it was like English school. And this teacher was quite unique. He was not proposing the kind of British or Western values. Rather, he was trying to accept and assimilate the values that were in that culture. So, for example, he was eating khichdi by hand, sitting on the floor. For British who were occupying India at the time, they would consider this barbaric. They were criticizing this kind of thing. But this teacher was different, and so he was teaching English to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and was very quick to learn it. So same as when he heard Mahabharata for the first time, he learned it very quickly. The heroes, his famous hero was Bhima Sen, as to many other Indian boys. So he liked his heroic acts. He had an accident when he was a little child. The nanny who was having him, petting him, just cuddling him, or just taking care of him, somehow he fell down from her lap, and he landed on his cheek, not cheek, the thin, what do you call it? Thin? Yeah, thin. So, and his teeth were just out by that time, and so he bit his tongue so severely that when he was writing his autobiography, when he was already almost 70, he said that I still can find this place on my tongue because I have a scar. I can still notice it, that I bit my tongue so severely that that I still have this scar. And so somebody calculated that Bhaktivinoda Thakur had about 60 severe diseases in his life of 75 years. 60 times he was so severely ill, like on the brink of leaving the body, or very, very severely. If it was the fever, it was very severe fever. So his childhood started as a very perfect childhood in terms of love, care, and attention from his superiors, seniors. They had very rich maternal uncle coming from a very nice Brahminical family lineage, the Datta family, like we have in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time, Vasudev Datta, the Datta ancestors, or Gotra is very like Brahminical, and they were very rich. They had a lot of property. This village that they lived in Bengal, 100 kilometers, or about 15 miles from Calcutta, geography had the cousins and all those seniors, including his grandfather, would drive in an elephant. It's like, in 19th century, you would compare it to today's driving a Rolls Royce or something, the whole family driving different Rolls Royce or different business class cars. So it was very, very opulent and rich and aristocratic. It was just a renaissance of Bengal. Those were very prominent. There were no devotees in terms of Vaishnava devotees, but they were coming from an aristocratic background. And the series of calamities. But just before going to those calamities, another interesting detail. He used to get an interesting habit. He used to collect caterpillars, and then he waited till they become in those combs, and then they become butterflies. And when they become butterflies, he would let them out. So he was collecting them in his workshop or whatever it was. And so little Bhaktivinoda Thakur, being around 5 years old, he was running around the forest also trying to collect those caterpillars and bring them to the father and see if they're different. So they were examining them and then waiting for them to become butterflies, and then they would let them out. So they had a habit like this, a hobby like this. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur was participating. He was very energetic, lively boy. He was running around. They had their own beehives, which is again a symptom of like richness. So they not only had cows and grains, but they also had beehives like we have here in Gitanagari. So they had a lot of honey, and the boys would just run there and just take the honey from the comb and eat it like this with his brothers. And his mother would check their and would immediately know if they eat too much honey, and then she would chastise them severely because honey raises the body temperature, and in a hot climate like India, this is quite dangerous because you can end up having different diseases, which was actually sometimes also happening. So, this was the happy childhood. His first professor or first teacher when he was 5 years old was not so pious. He was not so good teacher. So he had some corrupt system there. And the corrupt system was that he would force the old students to harass the younger students. And when those older students were saying some untruth even about those younger students, that they stole something or misbehaved, the teacher would punish them. The easiest punish was he would take them by the ear and pull them through the room. The harder punishments were that the older students would actually beat the younger students. Sometimes saying untruth because they wanted some profit. So those older students were harassing the younger students, saying, if you don't bring me this and this and that, I will tell, things from those younger students. They would share this profit with the teacher. So that's how bad it was. So when Bhaktivinoda Thakura and his older brother, that the oldest brother of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he took a knife like a machete, and he went to the place where the was sleeping. He wanted to, or at least to, damage him severely. When Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was either 5 or 6 years old. When he saw this, he saw that he's entering. Krishna. Okay. We're left in a very dramatic moment. One brother Bhaktivinoda going with a knife to kill the teacher. Bhaktivinoda is running after him. So he ran, he caught him when he was already entering the room and the teacher was sleeping. So he caught him and said, he ran off. He didn't want his brother to kill the teacher. But the teacher, he woke up. He woke up and he saw what has happened. And he realized, he overcrossed the border. The next day, nobody saw him again. He left. So his next teacher, as I said, was French, and he was in this English school. And it was much, much better, of course. Anyway, I'm not going to spend too much time in his childhood. I just wanted to give you a scene of a perfect childhood. And then when he was a teenager, those calamities started to happen. His older brother, died of a extreme fever that he got from eating the lamb meat from his uncle. He brought some lamb, and they ate. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was also eating meat when he was a child, and his brother next day he got a huge fever. They were coming back to this Ula, the village where they grew up, because at that time they were studying in I forgot what's the name of the city, but in a nearby city. So they were coming back, and he died by next day when he arrived to this Ula or Bihar, not Bihar. I forgot what's the contemporary name for this place. Bhaktivinoda Thakur's birthplace. He stayed with his his grandfather, maternal father. So when his older brother died, it was a big shock to him. But also, not long after, his younger siblings and his father also passed away. When he was 14 and his father passed away, he said, wherever I was looking, left or right or straight or up or down, everything was dark. Like he couldn't see the brightness. He was confused of what's happening, why this happened, why this distress. He was questioning the philosophy, questioning religion. He was it was a time when he was starting contemplating and seeking for the answers of these all calamities, because with that, all those financial debts, he was not yet working, and his mother couldn't manage properly, and they were just going into debts. You know, they lost all those beautiful elephants. Only his grandfather were still riding this elephant, just to show that they're still coming from this background. But you know, they were actually already in debts, and they were in a big financial crisis, and people could not believe it because they're used to that. His mother is very rich, having those ornaments and jewelries, and nobody wanted to help. So it was big distress. So when he turned 18, he left to Calcutta to start working. And his first job, and again, this is very exemplary, or maybe just before that, I will mention one more thing, which is providential. When he just got married, he was 12, not married, but it was arranged for marriage with a 5-year-old Shyama Nidasi, and he was 12 years old. And he said, my first memories of this wife was that they were running around like children, playing games. So that was his first impressions with his wife. And so right after he got some fever, extreme fever, and this temperature was not going down. It was going to leave the body. And there were some fakirs nearby. They were chanting some mystic mantras, and they were known for their mystery. And so they approached those people, and one of those fakirs came to treat Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the young boy, and he, you know, made some tantric mantras, whatever his mystery, and then he gave him a rice with turmeric, rice with not turmeric, I forgot the name. Anyway, rice with something vegetarian, and he also said you should stop eating lamb and you should stop eating meat altogether. Just eat this only eat vegetarian. And he gave those mantras, and then he chanted some mantras, and then this night Bhaktivinoda Thakur had a dream of black snake coming out of his wound, and he had this little wound. It was like a pimple that was growing and had pus in it, and from that it was in his belly, and from that this temperature, high fever arose, and so he saw a black snake coming out of this pimple or this pus and leaving. And the next morning he woke up, the temperature passed away. And so they, of course, parents were very grateful for those fakirs. They went to them. Two things. He said that everybody will be dying in this village. That was before his father died. Everybody will be dying in this village you live. And the second thing he said, you will become a great Vaishnava preacher, the great Vaishnava. I don't know if he used the word acharya, but it's a great Vaishnava. So you better Calcutta. Okay, we're back. Sorry for those complications out of my control. And so he went to Calcutta to one of the first jobs that he had. He was having some sugar cane, something to do with sugar. And there was an interesting providential thing that happened to him, and that was that there was some customer, he bought some sugar cane or sugar candies, and he miscalculated the amount of money. So he gave him a higher bill. So the person paid and left. But then he realized his mistake, and so he ran after that person. Sir, sorry, I miscalculated. You paid me more than you should have paid. Here's your money back. And so when he returned to the stall, fired him on spot. He said, you got profit right there. You are running back and giving this profit away. As a sign and in teaching. Kind of teaching industry. Although he was not on the same position quite often, he had to change the jobs many times in this teenage or youth. And every time he got a better salary, but somehow he couldn't manage. The circumstances were changing in such a way that he had to leave the jobs. And so his grandfather was dying now. The future of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. His grandfather was a great mystic. Anyway, so he was already, but his house, killing the snakes because he wanted to liberate the snakes, and in Vedas the snakes, trying to liberate them as his last service in this material world. And so when Bhaktivinoda Thakur came, he saw his grandfather not lying on the deathbed, but actually jumping in the forest, killing the snakes. He was like, grandfather, I quit my job. I stopped. I went for the vacation. I had to interrupt all the business there. Come here, and you're not dying. You're here jumping in the forest. What's going on? He said, no, you listen to me. I'm leaving this body in 3 days. Okay, so you came the right time. I need to speak to you. And so indeed, in 3 days, he went to samadhi, internal consciousness, and kind of in yogic trance left the body. So it was very auspicious, very profound. But before leaving the body, he said to him 2 things. He said, right now, you're going through those calamities. You're going through those different disturbances, both in your work, in your career, in your personal seeking. You're very unstable. But he said, when you will turn 27, you will have a stable job the career will be lasting till the end of your life. And not only that, you will become a very great Vaishnava. You will become a head of the Vaishnavas. You'll be very known. His grandfather's the same thing as this fakir mystics said him. And indeed, this is exactly what happened. Now, to those calamities, we should add that his first wife got him a child when she was 15 or 16. And that was the first child. And when the child turned 7 months old, the wife died. She died. And so, Bhaktivinoda Thakur in 1861, he ended up with a 7-year child without a wife. So he had to very quickly find a wife to get married again. And that was Bhagavati Devi, who was a very pious lady. And they got married. And so with her, he had another 13 children. A very big family, 14 children in total. And of course, the most prominent son was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Bimal Prasad, as well as Lalit Prasad is another famous child. So not all children were famous. In fact, with some of them, he had even disregarded them because of them not taking the Vaishnava path. So anyway, as grandfather foretold, when he turned 27, the British rulers, they noticed qualities of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. At that time, he was in Puri doing tax collector. So from teaching, he moved to tax collector job. He was performing it. The British governors, they noticed his wonderful qualities, and they offered him 3 jobs straight away. One was in this tax collection, another was in something else, and administration, and the third one was in a jurisdiction or the high court judge, settle different conflicts. So we're running out of time very quickly. I just want to say a few more maybe things, and I also want to say at least a few things about Gadadhar Pandit. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was so exquisite in the way he was performing his duties that his career path indeed developed to the point of district magistrate. All the time British wanted him over. He was sorting out the most complicated situations and conflicts in just a matter of minutes with his intuition, with his insight and vision. At that time, he was already on the Vaishnava path. He was already, got completely convinced he has to follow Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He has started to establish the proper Vaishnava culture. He has developed a Namahata program, a preaching movement, and he has written and edited about 100 books in his lifetime. He has predicted, he has had a mystical vision of the great light coming from the sky to point out that the birthplace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is probably one of the most important things for us as Gaudiya Vaishnava followers. He has confirmed it with Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. He himself was already a guru, and he had this vision, so he pulled out the old maps, tried to see the map, how the Nadia looked, how the Nadia district looked, where was the actual Mayapur. Then he was starting evidence of Tulasis, there was evidence of his going through the maps, of the old maps, but then he found evidence in Chaitanya Bhagavat. There was a place which indirectly showed that this is the place of Lord Chaitanya's birth, because it said that when they went from the house of, anyway, there was a shloka, when they went from the house to Kazi-chan, they did not cross the Ganges, they went along the side of the Ganges river. So they didn't cross. In this way, it was like another evidence from Shastra. Then he found a precise shloka of Mayapur, which was called Miyapur, that actually showed and proved that Mayapur is there, the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya is there. But he needed a sadhu to confirm it all, of all his scientific background and evidences, like the maps and logic and the mystical science and his kind of intuition and vision and Shastra. Even the direct Shastra quote was there. Still he needed sadhu's confirmation, and with that, the Generalissimus Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj brought with Bihar. He was about 130 years old at that time. He was sitting, his eyes were not even seen. He had to pull up his eyelids in order to see, and then they were dropping back. He was just crumbled in this basket carried by Bihar, the servant. And then when they came to this place of Chaitanya's birthplace, he just jumped out and he was saying, Tomar Nimai Janmastan, Tomar Nimai Janmastan. And he was dancing in ecstasy in a fool. His body sprung and he became tall, 180 centimeters, tall, dancing in ecstasy, crying like anything that this is Tomar Nimai Janmastan. My Nimai was born here. This is his Janmastan. So everybody, he was such an authority of Vaishnava in Mayapur at the time. So when they saw this is it. This was confirmed. This is Yogapit. This is the place where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was born. And so it was reconfirmed, established, and the temple was built right there. And then he had another vision of this beautiful, huge temple, which is now manifesting there, where all the Vaishnavas, future Vaishnavas from all the countries and backgrounds will chant in ecstasy together the holy names of the Lord. So, and this is also coming. It's already, this prophecy already has been foretold, and it's already manifested now, both the temple and the devotees from all over the world chanting together. So those were the visions of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. My plea today for all of you and myself is that what we can pray today about is to have this perfect sadhana that Bhaktivinoda Thakur had. We cannot imitate his sleeping 3 hours a day or 3.5 hours a day, chanting the holy names almost like a lakh a day, in night time when he was writing his deep Vaishnava realizations in those wonderful texts and poems and bhajans. And then he was answering the letters and spending some time with family, eating very little bit, was kind of the same amount of chapatis. And, then he went to the work and did his work perfectly in 3-4 hours. He did something that others would take days to do. He was perfect in everything that he did, fully surrendering to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, establishing his birthplace, and establishing the pure Vaishnava teachings, and fighting different Apasampradayas together with help of his already teenage son, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura Prabhupada. So, and then of course there were those great fights like this Bishikesh, when they had to, completely put this plane himself to be a Mahavishnu, and had the rasa dance with those village ladies and doing all sort of stuff by just different tricks and yogic mystic powers, which really he had. When they were pulling him down from the stage, when they came to arrest him, his hair started to produce those different sparks, and so all the people got afraid. Oh, this now he will completely demolish, and some of them ran away. Some British just didn't know what to do. The British soldiers, they didn't run away, but they didn't know what to do. They didn't want to step further. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur was not away. He pulled himself, this person Vishkesh, by his hand, and when they saw that, okay, sparks continue to come out of his head, but the thunderbolts are not striking anybody, so the British soldiers helped to confine him and bring him to the jail, to the court. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the judges had fever also because he was fasting. He was saying different mantras and producing real calamity. But they didn't give up, and then eventually they cut his hair, lost all his mystic powers, and ordinary people saw this finally, that he was just ordinary person. They renounced him completely. They rid him, and the truth was manifested. So this was a big course, and it was all documented. See, the wonderful thing about even being a district magistrate or a high court judge is that all those things were documented with so many witnesses that this is just wonderful. And he had many things like this. He was pure, and he was chanting Shuddhanam. In some places, he was given mercy to Brahma Rakshasas that were, ghosts but they were ghosts, and they had a pious, Brahminical background, and they became ghosts. So no ordinary mantras, not even Namabhas. He was compassionate to even such ghosts, and he was liberated that he given mercy to this Brahma Rakshasa who was given trouble to these villagers there. They were astonished, and they were not even coming closer to this place. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur, by just chanting pure Nam, he liberated that ghost. And so there were other things like this were documented. In Vrindavan, when he was on parikrama, he was fighting the gangsters there. Actually, he was even shooting the guns. It was like his life was full of different turns, and sometimes he was really sick. As they said, 60 times he was sick in his lifetime. And eventually he gave up all his career. Maybe 8 years before he left the body, he completely distanced himself from this career. Although the British always wanted him to continue, he just started to go deep into the bhajan, just focusing on his literature, the temple building, the establishing Namahatas, but mainly in his bhajan. And at the end of life, 8 years before he left the body, he took the Baba, or 6 years before he left the body, he took the Babaji Avesh, which was the kind of like sannyas order. He took it from Gorkishore Das Babaji. And again, it was another reason, because Gorkishore Das Babaji considered himself a junior to Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He was taking shiksha from him. They had the discourses, and he considered him senior. But because he was already Babaji Avesh was a status like a sannyas order, Bhaktivinoda Thakur had to take it from somebody, so he wanted to take it from him. And he was hiding from him. And so one day, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was determined, so he went to find him in his place where he performed his bhajan. but he hid himself in a prostitute house and he was laughing there. Yeah, try to find me here, Bhaktivinoda, Sachidananda Bhaktivinoda. So, and he couldn't find him that day. Anyway, eventually he somehow would convince him and he got him this status of Bhagavation. Then he became just very internal and going to the kind of samadhi state. He left his body in a very, very auspiciously, very much conscious, spiritually Krishna conscious, and he left his body today, in the day of Amavasya, the hidden moon. And with that, I would like to say, 5 more minutes left, sorry, I probably will not have time for questions, the DTs will open on time. But I wanted to also say something about Gadadhar Pandit, which we should not neglect on this day. And Gadadhar Pandit, he was so close associated with the Lord. We know it's Srimati Radharani taking this form in this Gaura Lila. And Gadadhar Pandit, he was a perfect brahmachari. He was Naishtika brahmachari, very humble and meek and very gentle. And he was like a shadow following Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu everywhere. They were friends since childhood when his parents moved to almost to Advaita Acharya's house. You know, they were neighbors in Mayapur. And so they were seeing Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu every day. At that time, Nimai Pandit, he was teasing Gadadhar Pandit. He was always presenting some arguments. You know, he was a complete opposite character to Gadadhar Pandit. And so they developed this friendship since childhood, even when he was mocking and teasing him. But when he became a devotee, Gadadhar Pandit was the first one to lose consciousness. He just lost consciousness when he saw Nimai Pandit came as a devotee chanting the Hare. He was so joyful. He finally saw that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu finally manifesting what he came here to do on this planet Earth. So he just lost his consciousness, kind of just fell unconscious. And so then, yes. It's interesting, even from astrological point of view, we celebrate Janmashtami and we celebrate Radhashtami. Both Ashtamis, Ashtami means the 8th day of the moon. So when you take the 2 parts of the moon, the waxing moon and the waning moon of the 8 days, and you combine them together, you will get the full moon. The full moon shining brightly together, Radha and Krishna combined. So we celebrate Gaura Purnima when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came as the Radha and Krishna combined. He came on a full moon day, Purnima. So Gadadhar, although he is Radharani himself, his role in Gaura Lila is different. He is not like Radharani in Vrindavan, left-wing gopi, chastising Krishna and giving him joy and pleasure through her, like an interesting part of mood and character, rasa. And Lalita Devi, she's older than Radharani. She's teaching her how to chastise Krishna properly, when sometimes she's also meek and humble. And Lalita takes charge and she says, "Oh, you should do it like this. I'll teach you how to, how to chastise this naughty boy." And that's how their relationship goes. But the Gadadhar Pandit is a complete opposite nature. Talking about natures, sometimes we like to be engaged on nature. Look at Gadadhar Pandit. He exhibits, as Radharani, completely opposite natures she has in Vrindavan. And this is one of the reasons why Gadadhar Pandit is not going with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from Puri to Vrindavan. Because if he would, then they would not be able to continue this rasa. They would not be able to continue. Lord Chaitanya would not be able to continue to be a servant of the Lord and experience in this rasa, because Radharani would not be able, as Gadadhar Pandit, continue his role as just a servant, a shade of Mahaprabhu, and allowing him to experience what he came to experience, not manifesting her bhava of perfect servant to Krishna, and Krishna as would accept this energy, because Gadadhar is Bhakti Shakti. He's a pure manifestation of Bhakti Shakti, but he has to exhibit it or manifest it in a completely different dynamic. And this is it's austerity like anything. So again, when Gadadhar Pandit was coming out of Puri after Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he couldn't bear the separation, but he had a sannyas. He had to stay in Puri. He had a vow. He gave the different vows to stay just in Puri. Of course, this vow was given because Lord Chaitanya spent most of the time in Puri. He was there reading with him Srimad Bhagavatam. That was his service. He was the best reader of Srimad Bhagavatam. In Tota Gopinath temple, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would come every day Gadadhar Pandit would just read over and over the Srimad Bhagavatam. They were reading it hundreds of times, all those pastimes. They were reading it together and they were both crying. And when Srinivasa Acharya came, he couldn't study anymore this Srimad Bhagavatam because the Srimad Bhagavatam was all with tears. It was not possible to read it anymore. So he couldn't study it there in Tota Gopinath Mandir. And so this was the service. Swarup Damodar, as he was chanting the bhajans. He was chanting the bhajans to manifest those in Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu emotions of separation. He was cultivating this mood of separation. And Gadadhar Pandit was doing the same through reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, those emotions of separation, so Lord, from his beloved devotees. He was doing it from chanting and reciting Srimad Bhagavatam and Swarup Damodar through chanting the bhajans. And together, they tuned in a perfect scene and an environment for Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to experience the perfect loving separation. So these are a few words about Gadadhar Pandit. We can say much more pastimes. Gadadhar Pandit, how he met his spiritual master, who was Pundarik. And it's actually, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur, if you read his life, you can actually make certain judgments which you should not be making, because we're talking about Acharya. So in the same way, make judgments of them because we don't understand this high level and why they're doing it. Like Ramananda Roy, he's in his internal consciousness, massaging and his Vishaka in his eternal form. And he's not. This is a male body massaging. What is this? How come this can be a great devotee? Oh my God, So we can perceive the reality, which is not the reality. The reality is that he's the Lord. So like this, Ramananda Roy, then Pundarik. He's another one who is in this opulence, and he's in his eternal past, and he's Vrishabhanu. He's a father of Radharani, and so Gadadhar Pandit as Radharani takes Pundarik. What's his second part? Pundarik Vidyanidhi. He's taken initiation from her father. Understand the relationship. When Gadadhar Pandit first sees Mukunda that brings him to get the first darshan, and he sees this Pundarik Vidyanidhi still on these red couches, and there's many beautiful silk pillows, and he's chewing this pan and all those spitting beautiful vases for him, spitting the pan this way, whichever will be convenient for him. This scene is just astonishing. And Gadadhar Pandit sees this, and he heard about Pundarik Vidyanidhi from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu before. He was calling his name. He's coming soon. Oh, Pundarik Vidyanidhi, he's coming soon. So everybody was kind of in anticipation of this great devotee. And when they saw him, when Gadadhar Pandit saw him, he was like, internally he could not accept this. He was an Aishtika brahmachari in this austerity. He expected a different picture. And so Mukunda had to very quickly rectify the situation. He had to see, okay, I know what's going to happen next. If you're going to say something that's going to be an offense, I better chant this verse now. And he chanted the verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, describing this from third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Uddhava is praising Krishna. Oh my Lord, where can I find this master, greater master than he? Except Putana, who wants to kill him with neglecting the desire to kill him and just accepting the desire to give him milk as the mother, and makes him a personal associate in the spiritual world. Where can I find Lord like this? So the moment Mukunda has cited this shloka, I don't know, when he cited the shloka from Srimad Bhagavatam, Pundarik Vidyanidhi, always opulent, chewing pan and sitting with comfort. He became mad. He started to crush everything with his hands and legs. And he started to roar, and his servants were trying to pull him down, and they couldn't. Then they started to at least save the the very expensive furniture and cushions and vases and all of those things. They tried to save whatever left. And so he was doing this for like an hour or so, and then he fell on the floor, and he was like 6 hours in trance. And this is again the confirmation that this is not an external, just me being in Sahajiyas, they can even cry and for 6 hours after they do this performance. And in fact, in Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati times, there was once such situation, and everybody came to Vrindavan to see such person who was almost like foaming from his mouth. What do you think about this person? He said, Kanishtadikari. That was a statement from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And that's how bold Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was. And this was again a proof in Chaitanya Charitamrita that when Gadadhar Pandit saw it, that's it, he surrendered that moment. He said, how to rectify? Not only he asked forgiveness just for his thoughts, he didn't even say anything, but he also asked for shelter, for diksha. And when he came back to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and they came with Pundarik Vidanidhi, and he said this, that and he greatly accepted me, and he said, I will give you a diksha initiation on such and such Dvadashi day, which will be very auspicious. When Lord Chaitanya heard that he's going to take initiation from Pundarik Vidanidhi, he said, this is so wonderful. This is the best news I heard. Why to wait for the Dvadashi? Let's do it right now. So he was, and that's what happened. He got the initiation right there, that very moment, that very day. So there were many pastimes with Gadadhar Pandit, beautiful pastimes, and you have to understand the dynamics, how difficult it was. You have to understand how difficult it was for Radharani to exhibit this completely different bhava, different emotion. In other words, performing devotional service, not according to her nature. Her nature is different. But she had to almost manifest Rukmini's. In fact, it is even said, some acharyas mentioned this point, that Rukmini's bhava was also in Gadadhar Pandit present, because without that, it wasn't possible to just be always meek and humble and not to manifest the Radharani's bhava. So that Gadadhar Pandit had to go to do it through the whole Gaura Leela, and it was not easy in one sense, but he did it for the perfect pleasure of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, perfect pleasure of Lord Krishna in that mood. So I think I should finish here with Gadadhar Pandit and Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Just to revise the main points that I wanted to say is that we are so much connected with Bhakti daily with so many bhajans, at least those bhajans that we actually supposed to chant every day. Radha Madhava, because we hear Bhagavatam every day. The Sharya Vijayal before taking prasad. Bhoga Arati, sometimes we chant, but not often. But Gaur Arati we always chant if we are in temple. And so the other bhajans also that are we can chant Gurudev, Kabe Habe Bolo, Saidya Namar, and many others. And of course, as I said, to pray to Bhaktivinoda Thakur today, to have a perfect sadhana, to use time wisely, both in our spiritual and material activities, because Bhaktivinoda Thakur was the best and the most perfect example of, you can say, a balanced household or grihastha, who was fully 100% involved in mission and fully 100% performing his duties. And of course, Lord helped him to perform those duties perfectly and very quickly, just because of his focus on Lord Gauranga Mahaprabhu, on Lord Krishna's mission. So through this concentration, he was able to achieve all these wonderful things he did. And he was very valuable, very much, as you know, even British, they made a special railway to his house to get him to the job quicker. They were just fulfilling his terms. because that's how valuable he was for them, for their government, for their. And so if devotees would become such examples today, that both mundane leaders or some important persons, business persons, would seek devotees, be in them, to consult them or work for them, and they would treat them accordingly, knowing their value. When you understand the value of a person, you treat them accordingly. You give them more benefits, more annual leave, more something. It becomes special terms because how valuable those persons become. So this is what our society should be meditating on, and pray to Bhaktivinoda Thakur to empower us in such a way so that would happen and manifest. And so be exemplary in their behavior and their duties, both material and spiritual duties. So we can pray to Bhaktivinoda Thakur to give us at least little empowerment for perfecting our sadhana, so we can manifest such qualities. Okay, Hare Krishna. Thank you, dear devotees. Internet was falling off. Realizations, additions. So maybe we have a few more minutes. Okay. Nothing in the chat. Nobody unmutes him. Oh, Krishna.
Thank you so much for braving us in this nectar of these wonderful pastimes. I was just considering one of the things that I feel about is that the relationships that are shown in those writings are to help us as a community of devotees see how we're supposed to interact with each other, how we're supposed to say about not to take the outside view of someone, but really understand what they're thinking, nature and understand sentiments. And yet I feel that all the people that read about and take it are so exalted, and they're looking directly in the spiritual world. Shiva, this person is probably like. So how do we really take the essence from Chaitanya to be into our own hearts as to how we interact with each other here in our own spiritual community?
So Yashodama is asking about how do we take those examples, great and exalted examples from Chaitanya Charitamrita, always somebody in the spiritual world associates with the Lord, and they show by their example the different dealings and interactions. And sometimes how do we take the outside, not consider that, judge it, not give it some as our perception. Maybe we should understand that there's some inner dynamics which we don't see, and how to not take not seriously, but how to properly interact, not when we see something outside, especially since it's about exalted personalities, and maybe in our society it's not all the devotees are eternalists of the Lord or something like that. So how do we take the Chaitanya Charitamrita example, and how do we practically implement it in our dealings with Vaishnavas in the ISKCON community or just daily lives? So for this reason, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is actually a very good question. Thank you. And for this reason, Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself is exhibiting, even his own life is an exhibition of how we should not judge of what's happening. Because if we take an acharya and you read his autobiography, he puts everything so sincerely there that you might think, come on, this is just an ordinary person going through the ordeals, and his surgeon, he was eating meat and this and the other, and you can start diminishing in your mind when you be just reading his autobiography. You start diminishing his exalted position as Kamala Manjari, and you know that in his spiritual revelations, he had a darshan of Lalita Devi. She asked him, "Who are you?" And all of a sudden, he didn't know what to answer, and then the next second he understood, he remembered who he is in the spiritual world. we're dealing with, a manjari from this whole world who has revived the pure bhakti for us of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's branch. And at the same time, he was going through so extraordinary situations which we can relate to. We coming from Mlechas, Yavanas, per today's backgrounds. But as Prabhupada verse 2 ago in Srimad Bhagavatam, that it doesn't matter you're born in India or outside of India, in this family or the other family, everybody can become pure devotees. In other words, we don't know why, like who we are in the spiritual world. We don't know yet. It may open to us one day if we continue practicing. And for that very reason, because we actually don't know, not who we are and who is sitting right next to us, we should treat everybody like we have Narni sitting here. That's how we should be treated, and not judging. Of course, if you are in the position of, I don't know, GBC temple, you have to correct sometimes certain behavior, you have to deal with the external behavior. So yes, you have a duty, ungrateful duty, to deal with this, to do certain corrections. But otherwise, if it's not, and you cannot perceive, especially if somebody senior to you, you just don't make any conclusions. Let Krishna deal with those conclusions. Let Krishna deal with his devotees, because he loves them unconditionally. He will certainly deal with them. Us, maybe we don't love the devotees in order to, discuss that or make points about it or do something about it. So in order for us to avoid those offenses, we better do our internal garden work. This is more, and to relate with respect to everybody, and let Krishna to deal with the rest. And those respected devotees who can deal. If you're concerned, you can approach some other senior devotee who has a relationship with the devotee, to just say, I don't understand this, it a little bit disturbs me. So that devotee will pacify your disturbance, and at the same, in this way, you continue chanting. Okay, Hare Krishna, dear devotees. I'm sorry I didn't read the chat, but we are opening the deities now. Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Gardharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Kochirba Mahotsava ki jai. Karadhar Pandit ki jai. So Prabhupada.